Okay, so have you ever, like, I don't know, been in a situation where you knew what you wanted to say in English,
Yeah.
but the words just wouldn't come out? Like maybe you froze up ordering food or, stumbled through a conversation at work. It can be so frustrating,
Oh, absolutely.
but you are not alone. And that's why today we're diving into this guide. It's called Simple Steps to Speak English Confidently.
I like that title.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. It's backed with practical tips. And we're going to unpack the best strategies to help you boost your fluency and your confidence.
It's interesting. This guide doesn't jump into grammar rules or vocab lists right away. It really starts by emphasizing confidence, which I think is spot on.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. It's like
Right. Mm.
you could have all the ingredients for an amazing cake, but if you don't believe you can bake it, it's probably not going to turn out so well.
Exactly. It's the same with language. Self-doubt can really hold you back. But here's the cool part. Confidence is a skill. It's not something magical you're born with. And this guide breaks down how to build it, step by step.
So where do we even begin? Because sometimes even thinking about speaking English can feel overwhelming.
Right. Well, the guide suggests starting small, with surprisingly small actions, actually. Things you can easily fit into your daily routine.
Okay.
For example, have you ever tried talking to yourself in English?
Wait, like having full-blown conversations with myself in the mirror? Because that sounds a little intense.
Uh-huh. No, not necessarily. It's more about incorporating English into your inner monologue. So describe what you're doing as you make breakfast. Mentally narrate your walk to work. Just little things like that.
Hmm.
It's like giving your brain a mini workout in English without the pressure of an
I see.
audience.
So it's not about sounding perfect
Mm-hmm.
or having complex conversations right away. It's just about getting comfortable thinking in English
I
like
like
that.
that.
And what's the benefit of this besides not looking completely crazy talking to myself?
Well, think about it. When you think in English, you eliminate the need to translate from your native language.
Yeah.
This makes your speech faster, smoother, more spontaneous. Plus, it helps solidify those neural pathways,
Yeah.
making English feel less like a foreign language and more like a natural way to communicate.
That makes total sense.
Oh.
It's like learning to ride a bike. At first, you're wobbly and unsure, but with practice, it becomes second nature. And speaking of practice, this guide is a big advocate for consistency. They suggest finding a speaking partner, using online platforms, even just chatting to yourself, anything to create opportunities to actually use the language.
I think that's crucial because you can study grammar rules and memorize vocabulary lists all day long. But until you actually apply that knowledge in real conversations, it won't truly stick.
Yeah.
It's like learning to play piano. You can't just read sheet music. You have to actually put your fingers on the keys and practice.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's not just about how you practice,
Yeah.
but also how you practice.
Yeah.
So a speaking partner offers that real-time interaction. Online platforms expose you to different accents and even that talking to yourself thing we were talking about
Yeah.
helps solidify your thoughts in English.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance that works for you. But the key takeaway here is make English an active part of your life, not just something you passively study in a textbook.
Okay, that's a great point. And it actually reminds me of another section in the guide I found really interesting. They talk about the importance of building vocabulary that is relevant to your interests and daily life.
Yes, it emphasizes quality over quantity. Instead of trying to memorize endless word lists, focus on the words you'll actually use. So, are you a tech enthusiast? Learn the vocabulary of coding and software. Love to cook? Master culinary terms. This approach not only makes learning more enjoyable, but it also ensures that the words you learn are meaningful to you, so you're more likely to remember and use them confidently.
That's so much more practical
Yeah.
than just flipping through a generic dictionary, right? I mean, how often am I really going to need to talk about like
Mm.
the different parts of a spaceship in everyday conversation? Probably not very often.
Yeah.
But if I'm passionate about cooking, learning how to describe different flavors and techniques in English is going to be way more helpful and fun.
Exactly. And it makes learning less daunting, too. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by a mountain of vocabulary, you can focus on building a collection of words that truly matter to you.
This is making me want to go whip up a batch of cookies and describe them in elaborate detail, all in English, of course. But first, let's talk about another key ingredient for confident speaking: pronunciation. I know this is something a lot of people struggle with, myself included. What does the guide have to say about that?
Well, it acknowledges that pronunciation can be tricky, but it also stresses that it's a crucial element of clear and confident communication. And they have some fun suggestions like mimicking actors in movies or using pronunciation apps to pinpoint those tricky sounds.
Ooh, I love the movie idea. It's like turning pronunciation practice into a fun activity rather than a chore. And speaking of fun, I found that listening to music in English has really helped me with my pronunciation. It's a great way to absorb the rhythm and intonation of the language, almost subconsciously.
Absolutely. Music is a fantastic tool for language learning because it engages multiple senses. You're not just hearing the words, you're also feeling the rhythm, the emotion, the overall flow of the language. And the guide also emphasizes the importance of active listening. It's not just about passively hearing the sounds, it's about actively paying attention to how native speakers use the language.
So how do we actually DO that? What does active listening look like in practice? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, might be guilty of just kind of zoning out when listening to English, especially if it's something like a podcast or a news report.
That's a great question. Active listening is all about engaging with the material, not just letting it wash over you. It's about paying attention to the nuances of pronunciation, the way words are stressed, the pauses and inflections that convey meaning. And it's about asking yourself questions as you listen, like, why did the speaker use that word instead of another one? Or, how does their intonation change depending on the context?
Oh, I see. So it's like becoming a detective of language, trying to uncover the clues that make English sound natural and engaging. And the more we actively listen, the better we'll be able to incorporate those elements into our own speech, right?
Precisely. It's like training your ear to recognize the subtleties of the language so you can start using them yourself.
Okay, this is all making so much sense. But let's be honest. There's one big elephant in the room when it comes to learning English: grammar. It can be so intimidating. I mean, just thinking about all those tenses and rules makes my head spin a little. So how does the guide suggest we tackle this beast?
Well, it actually offers a surprisingly reassuring perspective. It says that perfect grammar is not the goal, at least not in the early stages.
Right, really. Because I feel like so much emphasis is put on getting the grammar right,
Yeah.
especially in traditional language learning.
Mhm.
So what should we be focusing on instead?
The guide emphasizes the importance of clear and understandable communication. It argues that focusing too much on grammar early on can actually hinder fluency and make you more hesitant to speak. Instead, they suggest focusing on the basics.
So things like basic sentence structure and the most common verb tenses.
Exactly. Master those first, and then gradually incorporate more complex grammar as you progress. Think of it this way. You wouldn't expect to build a skyscraper without first laying a solid foundation. Grammar is that foundation for your English speaking skills.
Okay, that's a really helpful analogy. It's like we need to build a strong base before we can start adding all the fancy architectural details. And it's reassuring to know that I don't have to be a grammar expert to start speaking English confidently.
Exactly. And here's another important point the guide makes. Even native English speakers make grammar mistakes sometimes. It's part of the language's fluidity and evolution. The goal is to be understood, not to achieve some unattainable level of grammatical perfection.
That is so freeing to hear. It takes a lot of pressure off, knowing that it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, I think embracing mistakes is something the guide emphasizes throughout.
Absolutely. It's all about shifting your perspective. Instead of viewing mistakes as failures, see them as valuable learning opportunities. Every time you make a mistake, you're actually getting closer to fluency.
It's like that saying, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Or maybe in this case, it's you have to make a few mistakes to speak fluent English. But seriously, I love that the guide encourages a positive and forgiving approach to language learning.
And that positive attitude is key. When you're enjoying the process, you're more likely to stick with it and make progress. So don't be afraid to experiment, have fun, and celebrate those small victories along the way.
All right, that is some seriously inspiring advice, and I think it's the perfect place to pause for now. But don't worry, we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll dive into even more strategies for boosting your English fluency and confidence, including the amazing concept of immersion.
Sounds good. So before the break, we were talking about embracing those mistakes as part of the process and that positive attitude. And that leads perfectly into this idea of immersion.
Yeah, the immersion section. This is where the guide gets really exciting.
Yeah.
It talks about surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. But I'm a little fuzzy on what that actually means in practice. Is it just about, like, listening to more podcasts and watching movies in English?
Well, it's definitely part of it, but it goes beyond just passive consumption. Immersion is about creating an environment where you're constantly exposed to the language, even in subtle ways. Think about it like this. Imagine you're learning to swim. You could read books about swimming technique, watch videos of Olympic swimmers, But until you actually get in the water, you're not truly immersing yourself in the experience.
Okay, I see. So with language, it's about finding ways to make English a natural part of your daily life, not just something you study in isolation. But how do we eh, do that? Because let's be real, most of us
Mm.
don't have the luxury of just hopping on a plane to an English-speaking country.
Right, but the good news is, you don't have to travel abroad to create an immersive environment. The guide suggests simple things like changing your phone settings to English, listening to English music and podcasts while you commute, or even reading news articles and books in English.
I actually started doing that with my phone recently, and it's amazing how quickly you start picking up new vocabulary and phrases without even realizing it. It's like your brain is working in the background,
Exactly.
absorbing all this information,
Yeah,
even when you're not consciously studying.
exactly. And that's the beauty of immersion. It's not about forcing yourself to study for hours on end. It's about creating opportunities for casual exposure to the language throughout your day.
So it's less about intensive study sessions and more about weaving English into the fabric of your daily life. That feels much more manageable and honestly a lot more fun.
And the more fun you have with it, the more likely you are to stick with it. The guide even suggests finding creative ways to incorporate English into your hobbies. Do you enjoy cooking? Find recipes in English? Are you a movie buff? Watch movies with English subtitles, or even try watching without subtitles once you feel more confident. The possibilities are endless.
Okay, that is such a good point. It's about finding ways to make English relevant to your interests. So it feels less like a chore and more like something you genuinely enjoy. It's like the vocabulary thing we talked about earlier, quality over quantity,
Uh-huh.
and relevance over random lists of words.
Precisely. It's about personalizing your learning journey and making it meaningful to you. And the more you personalize it, the more engaging and effective it becomes.
All right, so we've talked about confidence, consistent practice, relevant vocabulary, pronunciation, and now immersion. Is there anything else the guide suggests for boosting our English speaking skills?
Well, there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle, and it might sound a bit intimidating at first. Thinking in English.
Wait, like actually thinking in English? As in having my thoughts in English instead of my native language? Because that sounds like a superpower I'm not sure I possess.
It might feel that way at first, but it's a skill you can develop with practice. And the guide offers some really practical tips for getting started. For example, try labeling objects around you in English. Instead of thinking, that's a table, think, that's a table.
Okay, that seems simple enough. But how does just labeling things help with actually thinking in English?
It's about creating those neural pathways, those automatic connections between the object and its English name. As you practice this, you'll start to notice that you're no longer translating in your head. You'll start to think about the object in English directly without that intermediary step.
So it's like training your brain to see the world through an English lens. That's fascinating. And what other techniques does the guide suggest for this thinking in English thing? Because I have to admit, I am intrigued, but also a little intimidated.
The guide also recommends having inner dialogues in English. Imagine you're about to go grocery shopping. Instead of thinking about your shopping list in your native language, try mentally running through it in English. I need to buy milk, eggs, bread. It might feel awkward at first, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Okay, that's a good one. And what about when we're not just running errands? How can we incorporate this into our everyday thoughts?
The guide suggests journaling in English. Don't worry about perfect grammar or fancy vocabulary. Just write down your thoughts and feelings as they come, directly in English. It's a safe space to practice expressing yourself without the pressure of an audience.
That's a great idea. It's like giving your thoughts a voice in English, even if it's just on paper. And I imagine the more you do it, the more natural it will become to think in English, even when you're not writing.
Exactly. It's about building that mental muscle, that ability to process thoughts and ideas directly in English.
So it's not just about learning vocabulary and grammar rules. It's about changing the way we think. That's pretty profound when you think about it.
And it's a game changer when it comes to fluency and confidence. When you're no longer translating in your head, your speech becomes smoother, faster, and more spontaneous.
It's like unlocking a hidden level in your language learning journey. You're not just speaking English, you're thinking in English. That's amazing.
And it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. You can engage in conversations more easily, express yourself more clearly, and even connect with English-speaking cultures on a deeper level.
Okay, I'm sold. Thinking in English, it's officially on my to-do list. But let's be realistic. Changing the way you think is no easy feat. It takes time, effort, and probably a lot of patience, right?
Absolutely. The guide stresses that learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be days when you feel frustrated, when you want to give up. But on those days, it's important to remember why you started. What are your goals? What do you dream of achieving?
That's such an important point. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day challenges
Ah,
and lose sight of the bigger picture. But remembering those goals, that vision of yourself confidently speaking English, can be a powerful motivator.
exactly. And don't forget to celebrate those small victories along the way. Every step forward, no matter how small, is bringing you closer to your goal.
And remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are countless others out there learning English, facing similar challenges,
Yeah.
celebrating similar victories. Connect with them. Share your experiences. Support each other.
That's a fantastic point. Having a supportive community can make a world of difference. It's a reminder that you're not alone in this, and it's a source of encouragement and motivation when you need it most.
And it can also be a great way to practice your English in a fun and relaxed environment, whether it's an online forum, a local language exchange group, or even just chatting with friends who are also learning English. Those real-life interactions are invaluable.
Absolutely. And speaking of real life interactions, let's talk about one of my favorite sections in the guide, real world practice.
Yes, this is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
We can study all the grammar and vocabulary we want, but ultimately it's about being able to use English confidently in everyday situations.
Precisely. And the guide offers some really practical tips for bridging that gap between theory and real world application. For example, they suggest role playing different scenarios. Imagine you're at a restaurant ordering food, asking for directions, or having a casual conversation with a colleague.
I love that idea. It's like a dress rehearsal for real-life conversations. You can practice different phrases,
Hmm.
experiment with different intonation patterns, and get comfortable with the flow of conversation.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the less intimidating those real life interactions become. You'll start to feel more confident, more prepared, and more capable of handling whatever situation comes your way.
And isn't that the ultimate goal? To be able to use English confidently and naturally in any situation. Not to
Yeah.
be perfect, not to sound like a textbook, but to be able to communicate effectively and connect with others.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about expressing yourself, sharing your ideas, and building relationships, all in English. And the more you practice, the more you'll realize that most people are incredibly supportive and understanding, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you find your balance. But with practice, you'll gain confidence, you'll become more fluent, and you'll be able to enjoy the ride.
That's a perfect analogy. And speaking of resources, the guide does a fantastic job of highlighting all the amazing tools available to support your learning journey. From language learning apps like Duolingo and Babbel, to speech analysis tools like Speechling, there's something for everyone.
It's like having a personal language tutor in your pocket. And with so many options available, you can tailor your learning experience to your specific needs and preferences.
Exactly. Whether you prefer structured lessons, interactive games, or real-time feedback, there's a tool out there that can help you achieve your goals. But remember, technology is just a tool. It can supplement and enhance your learning, but it can't replace the hard work and dedication required to master a new language.
It's like that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The resources are there, but it's up to you to make the most of them.
And that brings us back to the importance of motivation, consistency, and a positive attitude. Those are the key ingredients for success in any language learning journey.
It's a journey that requires effort, dedication, and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone. But it's also a journey that's incredibly rewarding, both personally and professionally.
And it's a journey that's never truly over. Language is a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving and adapting. So embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and enjoy the ride.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive on speaking English confidently. It's amazing how much practical wisdom is packed into this guide.
It really is.
From building confidence and thinking in English to embracing those mistakes and using technology wisely, it feels like we've uncovered a roadmap to success.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive.
But as we've been talking about, knowledge is only powerful when it's put into action. So what's resonating with you the most from all this?
That's a great question. For me, it's that reminder that language is about so much more than just rules and textbooks. It's about connection, it's about expression, and it's about experiencing the world in a richer way. And I find that incredibly motivating.
Yeah, I love that. And it ties into something the guide emphasizes too, the importance of finding your personal motivation for learning English. Like, what doors do you want to open? What goals do you want to achieve?
It's like having a compass, right? When you know where you want to go, the journey becomes so much more purposeful.
Right. And speaking of journeys, this whole guide reminds us that learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, for sure.
There will be days when you feel stuck, frustrated, or like you just want to give up.
Oh, absolutely.
But on those days, remember why you started. Remember your goals. Visualize yourself speaking confidently in those situations that matter most to you.
I think that's so
And
powerful.
remember, you are not alone on this journey.
Yeah, this guide makes a great point about that too. It highlights the value of connecting with other English learners, whether that's online or in person.
Like finding a language exchange partner or a local group,
Yeah, exactly.
sharing experiences and tips. And honestly, even just a laugh can make a huge difference. It's a reminder that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And sometimes just a little encouragement from someone who understands is all you need to keep going.
Absolutely. And as you're going and as you progress, remember that English, like any language, is constantly evolving. So it's not about achieving some mythical state of perfection. It's about continually expanding your understanding
Yeah.
and your appreciation of the language.
So true.
Hmm.
It's about embracing those nuances, the different variations, like the slang and idioms that make English so unique.
Where it gives it so much character.
You know, who knows? You might even discover a passion for a particular dialect or accent along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you to think back to that initial spark, that reason why you decided to start learning English in the first place. What possibilities do you see unfolding for yourself? What doors do you imagine opening? Hold on to that vision and let it fuel your motivation.
Because I think we can both agree, the ability to communicate confidently in English can be such a powerful tool for both personal and professional growth.
Oh, absolutely.
It can open doors to new friendships, new career opportunities, travel adventures, even romantic connections. I mean, it can broaden your horizons and enrich your life in countless ways.
And as we've learned from this deep dive, the journey to fluency is not about perfection. It's about progress.
So well said.
It's about embracing challenges, celebrating victories, and most importantly, enjoying the ride.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So take that first step, keep moving forward,
Yeah,
and never stop exploring the incredible world of English.
that's what it's all about.